What's going on, Security Ninjas? Samuel here, and I like to hack things. Today, we're going to be talking about the top programming languages for cybersecurity. So, whether you're new to cybersecurity or you're just looking to refresh on what languages are current and applicable to the world of cybersecurity, you may often wonder, which language should I learn? Or what languages should I be familiar with? So today we're going to actually try to tackle that problem and figure out what language is best for you to start learning or simply just be familiar with. So we're going to cover a couple different languages today. They're not necessarily in order of greatest to worst. They're just simply in that order that I decided to talk about them. But at the end of the video, I'll give you my personal opinion and which one I think is best for you to start learning or simply just know how to read. First up, we have Python. Python is one of the most versatile languages out there today. Not only does it let you work from IDE, it also lets you work from the command line, which gives you some type of ability to whip up Python scripts on the fly. So in cybersecurity, when you want to test a script out real quick, you don't want to have to necessarily throw it into an IDE and debug it and deal with all that process of the formal programming concepts. You simply just want to type something up real quick when you're in the command line. If it works, it works. If not, you keep banging it out. According to Python's website, Python is a programming language that lets you work quickly and integrate systems more effectively. So based on syntax alone, as you can see here, I think that Python is probably one of the more easier languages to actually understand. So if you have no programming experience whatsoever, and you're thinking, I have to analyze a Python script, I have no idea what I'm doing. Well, it's actually not that difficult. If you can piece the various points of syntax together, you can probably figure out what most general Python scripts are doing. Of course, that's assuming the developer doesn't create some small or unique naming conventions for the variables. If you were to go ahead and Google Python tutorials, you'll find an unlimited amount of Python tutorials out there, some of which are on YouTube all by themselves. There are paid tutorials out there that you could try out. But why even pay for there's tons of free stuff and free content out there for you to learn Python. I think that makes Python one of the easiest languages to actually pick up, because not only is the syntax easy to read, it's actually easy to find more information on it. To be honest, when I'm writing scripts for, let's say, a Windows environment, I'm limited to, say, Visual Basic Script as I was many years ago. And I go online real quick to see, hey, I'm having a problem with this type of function. Can I get some help? And when I look at the results, and some of the Stack Overflow pages are actually from, 2003, that kind of makes it a little difficult. But if you were to do the same thing with more modern languages like Python, there's literally millions of results. So based on searching Python programming language, as you can see here, there are quite a bit of results. And like I was saying before, just the sheer amount of information available on Python is probably what makes it one of my favorite languages. It's not necessarily the best language probably for cybersecurity, or maybe it actually is. Overall, I think it's probably the most popular language right now, and probably will continue to be for several years to come in cybersecurity. You may be thinking, what about Perl and C++ and C#? Well, those are great languages themselves. But when it comes to versatility and the ability to take a Python script and move it from a Linux system to a Mac OS and even to a Windows system, assuming the dependencies are actually installed on the device, Python can go anywhere. And not to mention the ability to export a Python script to a .exe, then you can run it on any Windows system with the dependencies not even needed most of the time, because they'll probably be packaged in the .exe from the very beginning. I just want to let you know that you don't have to be an insane level Python programmer to actually use Python. I mean, there are simple tutorials like on Codecademy that you can literally pick it up in a matter of minutes. So you may be wondering, well, a lot of cybersecurity and hacking tools, they're written in Python. Don't I have to know it really well to use those tools? Well, not really, because the developer of those tools, they didn't design those for other developers. They designed it for you, the user, to be able to run it from the command line with various parameters for whatever task you're trying to accomplish. So just because a script or a program is written in a certain language doesn't actually mean that you have to be an expert on it. You simply need to know how to use the functionality that the developer intended to provide. Next up, we have JavaScript. So before I take a deep dive into the versatility and benefits and usability of JavaScript, I just want to say that I think it is probably one of the most important languages you as a security professional need to know. I know Python is probably my favorite, but the sheer abundance and availability and uses of JavaScript just makes it extremely important in today's cybersecurity world. So JavaScript is primarily used on the web. You may encounter it when you're navigating on a website or attempting to use some fancy feature on a website, but along with HTML and CSS, it is truly one of the core languages that power the internet. By the internet, I mean websites and web applications. And if you're coming from a security role, you probably know that web applications are extremely important to know how to use and test, because honestly, that's where the money's at. So as a security professional, let's say you're doing an assessment on a web application. You're thinking, that's pretty easy. I'll use automated scanners. I'll use some script-based utilities, maybe Python-based utilities to navigate the website and test for cross-site scripting and SQL injection, stuff like that. But what if the client or the customer really wants you to test the functionality of that specific web application? Okay, cool, no big deal, right? But wait, it's written in JavaScript. It's got a Node.js backend possibly. Okay, that's not a big deal, right? Well, is it? Do you understand JavaScript? Because as a security professional, especially when it comes to web application assessments, like I mentioned before, JavaScript is on nearly every website these days. So you're thinking, if I'm going to be testing any type of web applications, or maybe I'm a security analyst analyzing alerts coming through my SIEM, which are most of the time web-based alerts, there might be some JavaScript in there that I need to understand. While JavaScript isn't one of the more complicated languages, it can get a little obfuscated depending on the developer or the malicious developer of that web application or script or whatever utility they're trying to implement using JavaScript. So aside from it being a great resource and something that a security professional should definitely understand, you can actually do some pretty cool stuff with JavaScript. As you can see right here on your screen, this is a look of the various capabilities of simple JavaScript. Now, I know in security we're not focused on making these little flashy objects on the screen. We want to know, how can we use JavaScript to conduct a test or simply determine if something is actually malicious or not? Let me kick you a scenario real quick. Let's say you're charged with conducting a penetration test against a small organization, right? They have a couple workstations, a couple servers, but they also have a web server that hosts their business application. They have essentially a web app on this server that is hosting their main business revenue. And okay, for this particular test, let's say it's in scope. If you don't understand the JavaScript on that page, how can you legitimately feel comfortable inputting commands or attempting to do some type of input validation? I know that's all covered in the legal aspects of a penetration test, but not understanding the code that you're attempting to work with can be truly dangerous, can ruin your career almost. So as a security professional, it's important for you to understand one of the core web programming languages out there today. And like I've mentioned a couple times, it's not the fact that it's everywhere, it's It's not a difficult language to understand. You could probably search Google like I did right here and see that there are probably millions of tutorials on JavaScript. When it comes down to picking between certain languages, like which one's better, what's the top language for cybersecurity, based on the previous two languages that I discussed, Python and JavaScript, honestly, you should know both of them. You shouldn't rely simply on one language. Sure, maybe if you're a developer and that's your specialty, great. But as a security professional, you need to be well-rounded, not only in foundational concepts of network testing, network architecture, system administration, anything in the IT umbrella, really. You need to understand the languages that power the devices and applications that you're going to be testing or charged with protecting. I'm going to get off my soapbox about JavaScript real quick because as a penetration tester and an adversarial threat emulator, I find myself leveraging both Python and JavaScript on a nearly daily basis because it's what clients use. It's what organizations use. Everything out there is probably going to have some form of JavaScript on it if it's web facing. You think, well, maybe I don't test web applications as my job. I don't want to do web app pen testing. I want to focus on mobile applications. Well, newsflash for you. Mobile applications, assuming they're not a game probably, are simply just a small form of a web app that is taking data from the user, reaching out to a server for a request or an action, and then coming back to that mobile application, which in turn is actually just a small web app, which, to be honest, is probably using some form of JavaScript. So just think about that when you're deciding, well, what languages should I actually know how to read and understand? All right, so let's move on from Python and JavaScript. Those are both amazing languages that I believe everyone in security should probably have some basic understanding of. So let's move on to something a little more granular and outright kind of annoying to understand, but extremely important. So we're going to talk about the language C. So why the language C? Well, let me tell you, C is one of the oldest languages out there today. It comes in at around over 46 years old. Now, holy crap, when you think about cybersecurity years, stuff changes so quickly. So why are we worried about a language that's nearly 46 years old? If I'm trying to focus on starting a career in cybersecurity or simply refreshing my skills, why would I focus on something so freaking old? Well, to be honest, C has influenced almost every modern programming language, from C#, C++, Python, and so many more. Now that we know that C has influenced so many modern programming languages, we can kind of see why it might be important to understand the basics. So not to mention the fact that C is actually a really low-level language. It's not difficult to understand, but it does have some trickiness to it. It's also designed to be able to run on microcontrollers, simple machines. It's actually written into almost I believe every Linux operating system has the ability to run C code. Don't want to get too detailed on that because that's a little more detailed than we want to go on this video, but if you have more interest in C, you should definitely check it out. Why did I choose the C language over something more modern like C++ or C#? Well, simply because when I'm confronted with a lot of binary files, I find that they're difficult to read without actually understanding one of the core programming languages. When it comes to the applicability of C into the modern security professional's daily job, will they be using it daily? Probably not. I would say you'd probably be using Python and JavaScript quite a bit more than the C language, unless you're working on hardware hacks and stuff like that, which that stuff is actually extremely cool, and I really suggest you look into hardware hacking. So just a quick little note about the C language. While it's not inherently difficult to use, it's very tricky, as I mentioned earlier, because when you're developing in C, you have to actually manage the memory yourself. I know I mentioned this before, but I really want to drive that home and make you realize how much power you actually have when you're messing with a program written in C. Because if the developer didn't code it correctly, you can lead to buffer overflows or finding your way into a different piece of the memory, maybe into a location that's the current program's not actually running in. And that stuff can be pretty dangerous. Really cool though for hacking, for sure. So for those up and coming security ninjas or even the old timers, one of the funnest things you can do as a security professional is participate in capture the flag events. Basically what they do is, if you're not familiar with them, is you'll have a list of challenges, and they'll range from reverse engineering to web applications to network exploitation to password cracking, that kind of stuff. And what I've encountered a lot in the reverse engineering section of a lot of CTFs is that they want you to reverse a program that's written in the C language. When I first started out doing CTFs, I was like, who even uses this? But it's actually quite common. I wouldn't say it's very common, but I was actually really surprised when I kept coming across it. I was like, why are they using this type of language? Why can't they do a Python program or something in C++, something a little more modern? But as you learn this stuff, the skills learning those lower level languages actually translate up very well. By learning that type of language, you can really set yourself apart as someone who really understands the foundational knowledge needed for developing good applications. A bunch of you out there that are familiar with security practices and cybersecurity in general are probably wondering why I haven't mentioned other languages or scripting languages like PowerShell, Bash, and of course, CMD or Batch, however you want to define that. So I didn't want to confuse people, because I personally believe that PowerShell and Bash and even the command line in Windows are key foundational pieces of knowledge that as a security professional you should definitely have. Because regardless of what operating system you're on, or testing or securing, you should be able to function from the command line. Because although we live in a world of GUIs, we shouldn't be too reliant on them. So I didn't want to include them in here because they don't really require an IDE to develop in. They can be developed strictly from the command line. And of course, they're extremely important. How do we determine which language is best for security professionals? Hackers, security analysts, threat hunters, which language do we actually need to know? Well, first off, if you already know a language, I think you're a step ahead. Picking up another language or even understanding the syntax of one of the languages I've mentioned, such as Python, JavaScript, or C, you should have no problems, to be honest. If you can functionally program in another language, you're golden. I think you should stick to what you know and attempt to learn something else in small increments or whatever you can handle. Determining which language out of the three that I mentioned is the best. Besides, if you already know a language, it really depends on what you're doing. So are you conducting offensive actions or defensive actions? Are you trying to automate a particular task? This is all going to be dependent on that type of situation. If it's something that you can do from a Linux command line, shoot, go for Python. If it's something that you have to use Windows for, or simply a web app, you might be stuck with JavaScript. Like I said, it really comes down to what you're doing in security. If you just want a general programming language to get started, I'm going to have to say, out of personal preference, Python, because it is so versatile. I think that out of these three, that is definitely the best choice you can make as a new security professional getting started, or even as someone who's been in the game for a while and simply wants to learn something new. So many cool programs are written in it. You can develop so many things. I have several Python scripts I use daily that are invaluable, to be honest. I would waste a lot of time if I didn't have them. Let's just put it that way. Before you start Googling away, how do I learn Python or JavaScript or C, really take a step back and, like I mentioned before, figure out what you're going to be using them for. Now, like I've said earlier in the video, having that foundational knowledge is key to not only getting into cybersecurity, but moving further in your current role or beyond. Once again, the foundational knowledge. Whatever language you decide to go with, stick to it, become proficient at it, look at other languages here and there. Just make sure that you can understand the syntax of various programming languages. Alright, security ninjas, I'm glad you joined me for this video. If you have a specific topic you'd like me to talk about, please leave a comment below. And as always, please hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell. That way when I upload new videos, you'll be the first to know.